So to stay as two adults and in a long-term relationship to find a way to stay as two maturing and aging adults as time goes by. It is no longer a question of, like the man doesn't get an erection as fast afterwards or as often. He might not keep it during the sexual act and have to maintain the connection in a different way. Yeah. Whereas with a woman as she grows older, she often goes much later into adult sexual maturity. So you will often find that a woman in her early 20s has not yet found a way to actually enjoy sex for herself, whereas maybe a woman in her 50s or 60s is becoming much more erotically self-aware and self-assured. At the very same time when the man's natural biological sexual urge is not in the same easily recognizable potency. So for both the man and the woman there comes a time of having to develop what we call like the plus and minus poles, which is a jargon way of putting it, but the heart-genital connection, which a woman is naturally geared towards sharing and loving. A man is more naturally geared and driven by his sexual urge. And in order for a long-term relationship to be growing into sexual maturity and sexual exchange and intimacy, both partners have to begin to develop their the poles, the parts of themselves that is not naturally geared in them. So a man, for instance, has to develop a stronger heart.
Well, let's put it like this. Sometimes when we're working with men in men's groups, we say, okay, what's your biggest sexual organ?
Yeah.
And everybody looks down and wishes it was a bit bigger. But the thing is, the biggest sexual organ is the heart.
Yeah.
And what happens is that as men grow older, they can no longer just run off their drives. So how it works out is that if you, as a man, go to rejection and then regress every time that your woman says no to you, you're kind of weak-hearted. Whereas if you say to yourself, I'm not going to let her reject me. I'll stay with my desire. I'll come back another time when it's ready. And I stay, therefore, in a much more powerful position. It's a much more adult position. So, but I have to have my emotional capacity, which is my heart, and my sense of self much more developed to do that. So that she can't just knock me over when she says no. Because I'm, as a man, I'm sort of ready for sex much more frequently than she is. This is, this is an animal thing. But we're not just animals. We're emotional, relational, mental selves, spiritual selves even. So if I let my own desire be dependent only on her saying yes to it, my desire is weak. My heart is weak. And that's what I have to develop. That's why we see it as a process of maturing and becoming stronger.
The counterpart of that for a woman would be that she would, if she experiences when she's saying no, and she then experiences the man's rejection as frightening of being abandoned, she might fall back on then saying yes to having sex out of either a little girl who's scared, which is actually almost becoming incest then, if there's a little girl who is having sex in order not to be abandoned. Or she can also go to a level of where she starts feeling sorry for the little rejected boy and gives sex like a mother would give feeding to the child. Neither of it is very sexy, nor does it gives any real possibility of intimacy. It would stay in what we call the bonding pattern with mothers, fathers, children.
It's not an exchange.
It's not an exchange.
It's a pacification or giving up.
Yeah. So very,
for the woman.
Yeah.
It's a deep betrayal, and very often a woman's body will actually then start showing symptoms. Such she could have, like it could be that she would not be able to relax her vagina. She might even go dry. She might even feel that she has desire, but be able to cut herself off from it.
So what we find with our couples, if there's a presentation of gynecological problems in the sex life, we want to find out, can the woman, how comfortable is the woman in saying yes or no? Because if she can't say yes or no from her mind, her body may take over.
There's another aspect to the ongoing thing. Like the sexual act is at a biological level is for procreation. There's a limit to how many children everybody wants. So then there's a thing maybe, what do you do with the sexual energy once it's no longer to procreate? Then we're living in a society in our Western world where the recreational aspect of sex is very strongly favored. It's seen as that is what it is for.
Sex is recreation.
As recreation. So it becomes a fun pastime. This is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. It's great. But it means that you could easily fall into a sense of it would have to be increasingly more stimulation visually or physically. It can become an addictive thing that you have to go to more and more extremes to get the same high from it. So you start doing swinging, so you start dressing up, which all of it can be fun. But it is not necessarily something that will give fulfillment in a long-term relationship. So there's another aspect of what do you do with your sexual energy if it is more about what we call co-creating, which is not about creating a new child, but is actually about really acknowledging that the sexual energy has something to do with your very existence. We are created from the sexual energy, and everything in life in some ways is sex.
What can we create together?
Yeah.
Rather than how do we use our bodies to divert ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is a much more fundamental thing and has to be faced when couples are childless or couples are aging, and then sex increasingly becomes less and less biological but more emotional and spiritual. What can we create? What will we make love for?
And then you move into a place of having to begin to have a conscious attitude to your sex life. Not to be unconscious is what you do. And that becomes then out of, instead of just being spontaneous, I'm forgetting myself, where an adult long-term relationship is asking maybe more for couples, beginning to have specific dates with each other. To actually arrange time when you have time to have an exchange. It may be a sexual exchange in the form of intercourse. It may be a sexual exchange just spending time together physically. But you plan it into your life like you would plan going to the cinema or you would plan going to a theater. Something that is part of your ongoing maintenance of your relationship. Whenever we suggest that to couples, they often kind of look a bit, oh my God, that sounds boring, like another hard work, there's nothing erotic about this. But actually, when they come back and have tried it, they realize the freedom in that. Because you go through the whole thing about the negotiation about shall we do it tonight or not, do you want it or not. Yeah. You actually make an agreement in 4 days' time, in the afternoon. This time is set off, there's no answer, no telephone being answered, no door being answered. This is time for us. Yeah. You don't have to worry about whether we're going to do it or not, and it becomes a part of. And within that space of having planned it, you find paradoxically the freedom to really begin to play with the erotic comes in a very different way.
So in the sense that you become more negotiative and plan things, you ease the field of expectations.
Yeah.
In the sense that you actually express that you become more negotiative and plan things, you ease the field of expectations.
Yeah.
In the sense that you actually express.
You take responsibility for your own desires and your own fulfillment.
Rather than expecting that your partner should know.
To second guess you, and if they really loved you, then they would know exactly what you wanted.
Yeah, and interpret all the time.
Yeah. So the long-term sexual...
Thank you.
You're welcome.